welcome to City Life. Because of Monday's aftershocks, our usual programming is not quite back to normal, but we have put together a program we hope you find useful. First up, Dr. Sue Nightingale. Welcome, Dr. Sue Nightingale, Chief of Psychiatry of the Canterbury District Health Board. So, in general, what is the mood in Christchurch at the moment?
Well, I think we're all aware that there's a great deal of anxiety out there. It's not just the fact that we've had the earthquake and we're undergoing the ongoing aftershocks, but the repercussions of the earthquake, of course, with people losing their jobs, worried about their houses, worried about their futures. So, yeah, I think we have to acknowledge that there is a great deal of anxiety out there, and that is totally understandable given the circumstances.
So you've seen a spike in the level of people who come and see you?
Well, we haven't seen a spike within the specialist mental health services yet. There is definitely a large number of people seeking help through the counsellors provided by the Ministry of Social Development. GPs are seeing a huge increase in the number of people they're seeing with anxiety. As I said, it's a normal phenomenon at the moment, and a lot of people just need that low-level help and support to get through it. What we know from evidence of previous disasters is that our peak comes next, that we're likely to see increasing numbers of people as time goes on when those initial measures aren't helpful for them. It's a small group of people. Most people will get through this fine, but we do know, and we're expecting that to happen.
Initially, what was the reaction to the stress of the earthquake from people?
Well, you probably experienced yourself, I think most of us did, that distress, anxiety, sleeplessness, but there's also that in the immediate aftermath of a disaster of just having to get on with it and respond very quickly. So there's a phase of, I guess in a way, forgetting about how you feel and getting on with the practical things, but then over time that passes. I guess some people call it even a honeymoon phase of, just get on and fix this, when we realise it's going to take longer. It's going to be more stressful.
Yeah. How do we look after ourselves?
Well, the important thing is that we acknowledge that it's totally normal to feel that way, and that we all feel that way. We have to be patient with each other, that tempers are going to be fraying and people are going to be easily distressed. We need to do as many normal fun things as we're able, given the circumstances, to make sure that we get enough sleep, that although it's a temptation to resort to the alcohol, that we don't actually do that, don't increase what we drink. Exercise is extremely important. It's a very good stress buster, I guess. So I think, just getting on and doing things as normally as possible, given the circumstances, is the most important thing. Okay.
What and other people, like our friends and our family, what are the key things that we should be looking out for with them as well?
Well, I think that when we're aware that it's beyond what we're all experiencing, when people's distress is overwhelming them, when they're feeling that they really can't cope, they can't do normal things, they can't get on with life, then we need to be talking to them about that, giving them the support they need, but also encouraging them to seek help if it's become overwhelming, if it's too much.
Okay, so how are things at the moment? We're 3 months on from the February quake. How are things in Christchurch now?
In terms of the mood of things, do you mean? Well, I think there is certainly that pervasive attitude still that we have to get on with things, but there is a lot of distress out there that we have to acknowledge and that we have to provide support for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we get support?
Well, at the moment there is still counselling available via the MSD, and I think just about every earthquake website will lead you to that. There's an 0800 number that can be rung. Alternatively, people can go and see their GP. We're putting a lot more support into general practices to give GPs more time to see people, and also to increase their ability to provide counselling within general practice. And both those services we have backup to those services and will provide support and, if necessary, see people. So it is there if it's needed.
Okay, so it's about looking after ourselves and looking after those around us as well.
Totally looking after ourselves and looking after others as well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Sue, thank you very much for your time today. Now Tina, tell me about Youthline.
Hi, thank you. Youthline has been in the Canterbury community since 1970. Youthline was first established when it was noted there were no support services specifically for young people. So Youthline was established to meet that need.
So what is it?
So back in 1970 it was set up as a telephone helpline. That's how young people communicated. We're committed to being where young people are at and to operating how they choose to communicate. So now young people can contact us via the telephone, via text. We offer text counselling, also an information and referral service, and leadership and development programs as well.
Wow. And tell me about the staff that people call up and talk to over the phone.
Yeah, so our volunteers are really the heart of our organisation. We offer a very robust training program which trains them to become telephone and text counsellors, and they are the people who the young people contact when they contact Youthline.
Now I hear you're relocating.
That's right. We, prior to February, were located in the central city, and so like a lot of businesses, we have needed to relocate. We are not able to access our building, not able to access any of our equipment, computers, files, etc.
Wow.
Maybe a bit uniquely to other businesses, our service is needed much more than ever at the moment.
Gosh, yeah. Do you feel like you're starting from scratch now that you are relocating?
It's a really interesting question. And in one sense we are feeling like we're starting from scratch. As I mentioned, all of our files, equipment, etc. remain inside our building in the central city, and we're not able to access that. So in a sense we are starting from scratch in terms of new furniture and computers and IT networks, etc. In another sense, we're building on a really strong foundation. We're building on the 40 years that we've had here in Christchurch. We're building on the wonderful people who we work with. We're building on our kaupapa, our culture, what makes us Youthline. We're building on our really good connections that we have within the community. So in a sense, no, we're not starting from scratch. We're building on the really solid foundation that we already have.
Okay. And has there been a disruption of services during the relocation?
No, for services for young people, no, there hasn't. The beauty of our system is that when our IT systems and phones crashed in February and likewise in September, automatically a new system kicks in and other Youthline organisations around the country are able to pick up those calls and answer those texts from young people. So it's just fantastic that when the service is so needed, young people have had no interruption to the quality or the type of service that they are receiving.
So at the moment, what are the issues that young people are experiencing?
Yeah. Young people on the whole are very resilient. Obviously at this time there's a lot of complex things happening in the lives of young people. You've got young people who have maybe perhaps lost their homes, maybe parents have lost their jobs, some young people have lost loved ones. We've got disruptions to schools at school times and school locations, disruptions to after school programs. So there is a lot of stress and a lot of complex issues. Some have had friends who have moved away from Christchurch and aren't moving back. There's been a lot of talk about the issues that are facing older people and adults and businesses and work, and they're very, very important. And I think it's important to remember at this time that that does mean that life has become a lot more complex for young people as well. They may be experiencing parents who, as I say, have lost homes or jobs, and we do know that domestic violence has increased as well.
So you have had a spike in people calling Youthline?
Yes, that's correct, and texting as well.
Okay.
Yeah, in the week following the quake we had 1,000 more texts received to the service.
Gosh. Now, you've got an earthquake support book.
Yes.
Tell me about this.
Yes, this is really exciting. This is a Youthline earthquake support book specifically aimed at young people living in Christchurch. So it's been written since February, specifically for those young people. We acknowledge that there's a lot of really good information out there, and talking about support and talking about what has happened. We also acknowledge that a lot of that was aimed toward adults and was in formats that were more applicable to adults and were able to be found in places like newspapers and libraries that were more geared toward adults. We wanted there to be something that young people in Christchurch could hold on to and know it's specifically for them, and a really useful tool for them. As you said before, you'd been speaking about physical health with the ladies before, and this is about talking about emotional health.
So what exactly is in here? So you've got trauma, grief,
Yep.
Hope. So just the main things that people
Yes.
can sort of keep in their bag, I suppose.
Sure,
and
it
sort of
is. It
refer
is.
to.
Before going to print, this booklet went through a team of young people to make sure that the format and the language was really youth friendly, and it went through a clinical team as well to make sure that the content was appropriate. One of the things that I really like about it speaks about that we've all gone through losses, and that there is hope, and that we had no control over what happened in February, but we do have control over what we do now. It's okay to ask for help. One of the things I really like is talking about some of the ways that you can express what's going on. So that could be talking to someone, it could be writing down your feelings, it could be going for a run, doing something physical, just acknowledging that it's important to be expressing those feelings. And there's 10 tips in here for young people around their emotional support, and also some other places that they can look to for that support.
Okay. At this time, how are you looking after your volunteers? I mean, they must have lots of phone calls coming at the moment. How do you look after them?
Okay, our volunteers, as I said before, are the heart of what we do, and are really at the coalface of what we do. It's so important that they are looked after. It's been a frustrating time for them as we have been relocated, and as I say, other centres are picking up our calls at the moment. So we have a team of really passionate and highly skilled counsellors, volunteers, who are just itching to get back and to be supporting young people. We're making sure that we're keeping them informed, and we're also making sure that we're supporting the volunteers around the country who are speaking with the young people from Christchurch.
Okay, how can we get in touch with Youthline?
Sure. If someone is wanting to access the helpline, they can call 0800 376633. It's listed in the booklet here, or free text 234. And if someone would like to contact me, either about Youthline or about accessing the books, they can call me, Tina, on 379 4797.
Tina, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to City Life. Because of Monday's aftershocks, our usual programming is not quite back to normal, but we have put together a program we hope you find is useful. Here is John O'Malley from Alpha Omega Healthcare. Now, welcome Dr. John O'Malley, who's here to talk about stress. What is it?
Well, in the current context, right, Christchurch post-quake, it's all about the tribe in the cave.
Tribe in the cave?
Well, if you think of, I always take an evolutionary approach when you're trying to understand human responses. Right? Oh, it's the same also. I mean, if you look at things like the horse whisperers and the dog whisperers and all that, they always look about how do these creatures operate in their natural groups, the herd and the pack. And in many ways, we are, just two meals and a big shake away from reverting very much to our evolutionary state. And the tribe and the cave are the two key components of our security. So, if you're looking at, even issues of fertility and things like that, women are looking for a safe cave, a good safe tribe. Now, what's happened in Christchurch recently, of course, is the caves have all started to shake and fall down. So we're no longer feeling that secure in our own homes. We're not even feeling secure about the future of our homes because, although I think the EQC and the government response in general is very good, it's such an extensive program that, of course, people are feeling individually isolated in terms of that response. And the tribe, of course, are the people around us. Now, if I'm stressed because of some response that's happening globally, it's very likely that those very same people around me are also stressed. And therefore, can I rely on them as much as I would have in the past, or as much in my mind as I think I do? And we also tend to catastrophise when we're under stress. So if we think through scenarios, like, is the next earthquake going to be even bigger? My husband or wife, my partner, are they going to be able to respond and continue dealing with the stress they're dealing with? And then this will show up in defence mechanisms. And defence mechanisms come around things in terms of particular emotional states. Anger, for instance, is one that comes out strong as a defence. When we are frightened, we have a couple of standard responses. We either run or we fight. The fight-flight response. And so the emotional states that are behind that are fear and fleeing, or fear can turn into anger. So therefore interpersonal relationships become challenged in these environments. It's interesting to note that they're saying that crime's down but domestic violence is up. I always thought domestic violence was a crime, but you know. And of course this I think may reflect a number of things that are happening in society. People don't want to go out as much. People are becoming more secluded and isolated within their own environments. Men tend not to talk when they're under stress. Women tend to ask lots of questions when they're under stress. Those two are going to lead to potentially interpersonal conflict. And in the physical body they show up as poor sleep, loss of appetite, or conversely can also end up as overeating. The bowel in particular is very susceptible to chronic long-term stress, so things like irritable bowel syndrome tend to be on the rise, that sort of thing.
How can we handle it? How can we deal with it?
Well, I think if you look at it, if you go back to the tribe in the cave, the key thing is try and work on those things that create stability. So knowledge about what's going on in your life is really important, because then that takes away that problem of catastrophizing. You don't guess about the bad scenarios if you know the real scenario. So I say get onto EQC, get onto your insurance company, get an expert in to have a look at your house and tell you exactly where you are at and what is going on. Communicate, resist, particularly I'm talking to the blokes out here, resist the temptation to lock yourself down and not express your feelings. I'm a chiropractor, and in my own practice I noted that some men who I would never have thought would have been that upset by the process, and this is by no means a judgment call, have become quite upset by it, and because we've known each other for a long time they're happy to chat to me about it. And so don't assume necessarily because someone is outwardly looking all right that they actually are right. If behaviourally things aren't going the way they should, ask questions of them, but try and do it in a non-challenging, non-threatening way.
Okay. So John, is it more for you about talking about it and trying to figure it out rather than prescribing anything for stress? Look, going to your GP in a short-term way to deal with a short-term response may be very effective, right? But pharmacological responses, it's not my area of expertise, but pharmacological responses are usually very specific, aimed at certain neurotransmitters, and if you don't actually have a psychotic episode, right, they may be of limited long-term effect. There are lots of good natural things you can do. Exercise, for instance, is a great thing to do. Yet, here we are, sticking to the cave, stay in our safe spot. But, I believe that the gym numbers are way down. But if you exercise, you burn up a steroid hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol gives us that tense state. So a lot of people talk about, I went for a big run and I've released all my endorphins. It's only those crazy people that run over goat pass that ever get to that level of exercise. Most of us are simply burning up excess cortisol in the system, which means we come out of that highly tense state. So exercise is good. Regular food is good, right? Sleep is absolutely critical. So do all the things you can to make your sleep better. Don't have coffee late in the day. Alcohol, right, you may think it relaxes you, but it actually makes you sleep worse. So it may have a very short-term effect in terms of relaxing you, but in the long term it will actually bring the system under greater stress. Okay, and just very, very quickly, what about St John's wort and rescue remedy?
Rescue remedy is something that a lot of people have access to and use really well. St John's wort is it's a nervine. In fact, you need to get Samantha McSorely from our practice in here because her knowledge in this area is encyclopedic.
Okay, will do.
But St John's wort has a similar effect to the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the SSRIs. These are things like Prozac and citalopram. Again, not my area of specialty, but it can be effective if you are on medications, particularly ones for depression. Make sure you're talking to your dispensing herbalist about that so that they know what you're on so they can advise you properly. You've got to be cautious about buying it over the counter if you are not if you are on any other sort of medications, but can be a very effective can be a very effective treatment for depression.
Great. John, thank you so much for coming to the program. You've certainly taught me a lot today.
Pleasure.
Now my next guest is Sam McSorely to talk about herbal and nutritional medicine. Now what can people expect after 9 months after the first quake? What should they be experiencing?
Well, stress is a big thing that we're all familiar with now in Christchurch, and just a few days off 9 months for our first earthquake in September. We're incredibly stressed, and more stressed than I think we realise. We've got 3 different phases of the stress response, which is the alarm, the resistance and the exhaustion. So in the alarm, we call that the general adaptation syndrome. Is the kind of scientific term for stress. And so in the alarm response, what we can expect to see is it's when we were in the jungle running from the tiger. So we have a lot of adrenaline circulating around in our body, which is called the flight and fright response, which you might have heard of. And that allows us to get more blood pumping around our heart to run, and puts us into the sympathetic mode. Everything shuts down, like digestion, etc. Now that's designed for short-term stress, which is what we all experience as part of life. Life goes up and down. And then you move into the resistance phase, which is around coping with longer term stress, and that's when our body starts to produce the hormone cortisol. Now cortisol is really important as a stress hormone. It's produced by little glands that just sit above your kidneys, called the adrenal glands, and they're about walnut size, and they produce about 50 different hormones, but cortisol is one of the important ones, and that mobilises sugar. It allows heart rate to continue going so that we've got enough energy to keep running and to allow ourselves to cope with that stress response. Now long term, being in that resistance response, the second phase of stress, is that it starts to have an impact on us, and we start to experience what we call functional illness at Alpha Omega Healthcare. So we can start to get things like anxiety and insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome. You can get a bit snappy, feeling like your vitality is low. And then we start to move into a phase called exhaustion, which I feel most Cantabrians are actually stepping into now. For many Cantabrians, we haven't had a full night's sleep since September. So we're all going around sleep deprived and starting to feel a bit depressed and a bit anxious. And the thing with stress is it's so insidious, we actually don't notice these symptoms, so we don't identify being stressed. It's other people that start to notice the characteristics of a close one has changed.
So how can we notice stress in somebody else and in fact ourselves?
Yeah, well, look back to where you were prior to the earthquake. How were you sleeping? How were you eating? How are you coping with day-to-day activities? What was your motivation levels like? How's your routine changed? How are you feeling inside yourself?
Okay. Is any level of stress a good thing?
Stress is a good thing. We're designed to have stress because we've got that, 3 phases of the stress response and the hormones that are designed around that. So we're designed to have stress, but not long-term stress.
Right.
So it's that long-term stress that starts to become the problem. And when you're not sleeping well, you don't really cope with your day as well as you would ordinarily, would you? Yeah.
How can we deal with it?
Well, there's several things you can look at doing. Firstly, be kind to yourself. Eating well, so making sure that you're having protein with each meal, carbohydrates, making sure that they're your fruit and your vegetables, going back to eating as close to the human food chain as you possibly can, trying to avoid those junk foods. What we tend to do is we tend to carb load, and that's one thing that we'll find, that when we've got a lot of long-term stresses, we can become adrenally fatigued. So we tend to go for high carbohydrate foods and high fat foods, which don't necessarily serve us. High carb foods tend to give us peaks and troughs with our blood sugar levels, so we get a high for a while and then we drop down to lower from when we started. So you get the fatigue and things kicking in, especially in the afternoon. So have a good, well-balanced diet with your proteins, low glycemic carbohydrates and your good fats.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about things like herbal medicines and things like that? Can they help?
Yeah, they're definitely good as an adjunct, so a supportive therapy that you can use in conjunction with the diet and the exercise, reducing your alcohol. So there's various herbs that you can use. You talked about St John's wort last week in the programme last week, and that's a fabulous herb, particularly good for depression, very good for anxiety as well. But you have to be very mindful of taking St John's wort, especially if you're on other medications and other herbs, because it can reduce the half-life of those drugs. Things like ginseng, things like withania, rehmannia, and so, you know, to get into herbal medicine, you're better to go and see a qualified individual that can tailor a herbal mix to that person, because everybody's response to stress is different.
Okay. So just look at the things that you can buy at your supermarket. St John's wort, for example.
Yeah.
So that will actually work. Things from the supermarket.
Yes, they can work. There's varying qualities of herbal medicine out there. There's off the counter, you know, let's try that. And yes, it can have an impact, but you are better to actually have something that's tailored to you. And when you're treating yourself, it's very difficult to be subjective in your treatment. You're better for somebody to come in and be objective about what's going on, because we don't often see what's happening for ourselves, which then rolls on to when, you know, in this time in Christchurch, surround yourself by your support systems, you know, your friends, your family. There's free counselling out there for people at the moment as well that you can get through your GP, getting out and walking. Just pull on all resources. And the elderly especially, who are isolated anyway, have become more isolated since the earthquake because they're frightened to leave the house, which many people are.
And finally, I spoke with your colleague last week about using rescue remedy as something to sort of calm you down.
Yes.
Is that something you would recommend as well?
Definitely something to have in the glove compartment of your car or in your handbag. I've used it on I was on a plane the other day and had some in my handbag, and people were talking about the earthquake, and you could see that they were getting quite overwhelmed by it because they lost their house and their job. And you know, it's there. It's there as a band-aid, but I think we need to go far deeper than that and actually get in and start supporting people with, you know, nutritional supplementation and herbal medicine, or, you know, drugs if people need those as well.
Welcome back to City Life. Because of Monday's aftershocks, our usual programming is not quite back to normal, but we have put together a program which we hope you find is useful. Here's Dean Peter Beck. The symbol of Christchurch crumbled in February's quake, and the Dean of the Christchurch Cathedral joins me now. Welcome to the program.
It's good to be with you.
What exactly was destroyed in the earthquake?
Well, the whole tower collapsed, of course, but fortunately I think the earthquake strengthening was where it did. It did its job. We got everybody out, and I think the tower must have held for enough seconds for the people who were having their lunches outside in the sunshine to scoot away out the way. Of course, we were deeply concerned that there might have been people in the tower and they would have been killed. Because in the end there weren't, which was absolutely amazing and wonderful, wonderful news.
It was thought there were 20 people trapped inside. Where did this rumour come from?
Don't know where the numbers came from. Certainly there were anecdotal stories about they'd seen people fall off, or someone came out who came out said there were people behind them. But in fact, when we got the security camera footage out and watched all that, there hadn't been any movement in the tower itself for about 3 minutes. So there was nobody in the tower. But nevertheless, it is quite amazing that nobody was killed. It was obviously a huge relief for all of us. I was expecting to go down and in the middle of the night when they rang to say prayers as they began to bring the dead out. But when they said, there are none here, I said, what? It's amazing. God. So I burst into tears. It was just extraordinary. It was wonderful.
And that was the first time that you had been able to express that grief for Christchurch?
Oh, well, no, we raised the Māori bishop and my bishop and the archbishop been down just before, and they'd raised the tapu on the cathedral, and that's when I really had a good cry, and I needed to do that. That got caught by all the world's cameras, I think, but that's okay, because you know it's really important for people to share their emotions and to get the tears out. I mean, it's been a terrible, traumatic, difficult time, and we need to talk about it, and we need to share our emotions with one another, and so we can help each other through this.
Generally, how do you think people are coping in Christchurch?
I think there's immense resilience in Christchurch. You know, I often talk about the Canterbury spirit, and it's certainly brought out the best of people, for many people. I mean, it's often in the worst of times you see the best in people. You know, and I've been quoted many times as saying, you know, this was not an act of God, this was the planet doing what the planet does. But we've seen, from my perspective as a Christian, the act of God in the way in which people have reached out to one another, in the neighborliness, the sharing, the willingness to sort of do things for each other. Yeah, student volunteer army, all those sorts of things where you've seen real compassion and care and courage. The urban search and rescue guys, they were just amazing, just wonderful what they did for us while they were here. And now that's continuing on. It's hard, it's frustrating. And we've got the winter coming on, and you know, people without homes and very damaged homes, keeping them warm and dry, people losing their livelihoods. All those things are major concerns for us, and I think there's stalwart efforts being made all across the board to support and help. That's what we should be doing as the people of Christchurch and Canterbury. And in a sense, that's what the cathedral has stood for, as the spirit of the city, the immense outpouring when the cathedral came down from people all across the board and all across the world, that the cathedral somehow represents the spirit of our city. So we will rebuild it.
How will it be rebuilt?
Well, that's a good question. It's still early days, but certainly the mayor at the very beginning made a very strong pledge about rebuilding the cathedral, and so has the government, because it does symbolise the city and the soul of our city. So we've formed a project control group. We're just appointing a project manager, and now we have a look and see what are the options, what are the costs, all that kind of stuff that you'd have to necessarily do. We'd like to get it up and running alongside all the other things that have to be done in the city. You know, we're deeply immersed and connected to the development of the central business district, the arts, the social services and the rest. I think that when I'm wearing this little dog collar here, and I'm round and about, I'm kind of implicating the church in what we're doing. And this city itself was actually founded by the Anglican Church in the last century, and in the 19th century. And kind of like we and our colleagues across the different churches and other faiths have a role to play in helping us to keep firm to the vision and the values that we think are really important as human beings, and helping to build healthy communities that sustain and encourage human community, human relationships, and build a better life for us all. And I'm hugely confident that we're going to do that.
Now, it is an Anglican church, but when it's rebuilt, will it still be Anglican, or are you thinking multi-faiths?
I think it will be the Anglican cathedral, and certainly, as we've always done, we've sought to be engaged and immersed in the life of the city. So, and it's been a place where people of other denominations and indeed other faiths from time to time have come. But it will be the Anglican cathedral. And I think it's important that we maintain that. But of course, reaching out and engaging with the life of the city and seeking to minister to its needs is what we're about.
Now, you are an active church. Where are your members worshipping now?
Well, we've been very generously hosted by Christ College, which of course is an Anglican school, and we're sharing their chapel with the boys. And the college have kindly allowing us to use their boardroom, which is very nice, I might say, for the time being. So there we are for the time being, and they're letting us stay as long as we need to. And like so many others, we've moved out of the immediate city centre, but we're quite close in. And part of what I'm needing to do is to, in a sense, maintain the sense of presence of the cathedral in the life of our city, and what it stands for in the life of our city. So that's a challenge that I've got. And as a Christian, I'm filled with deep hope and confidence in the future, because we're living in Easter time at the moment. And Easter is all about the triumph of life over death and love over hate, and believing that in the midst of the worst of times, we can find the resolve and the energy and the sense of purpose and new life that can carry us through to the future. So we look forward to the future with great confidence, and with good faith and the willingness to work with one another. We're going to do amazing things in this city. And in 50 years' time, our successors, because I won't be around then, will look back and say, wow, didn't they do a great job? Just like our forebears, didn't these people in this time do a great job? Huge challenge, and it's daunting, and we're going to get things hard on the way, very hard, but we will get there, and there is real resolve to make it a wonderful, wonderful place to live.
Just finally, at a time like this, do you find that more people turn to faith?
Well, it's difficult to know. I mean, I think people have done. I mean, what's been interesting is there are people, obviously our church people are very staunch, and the cathedral community, which is the one I know best, of course, have been amazing and we're really turning out, and the numbers have really kept up. And we're even getting some newcomers, even though we're kind of not slightly hidden away, but at Christ College. There, where more people are coming into our services, and I think that's happening around the city in all sorts of denominations. People are finding out where churches are functioning and wanting to be part of all that. because they care. And I think we've all been very, very shaken by all this. And it does bring us to ask some of the more important and deeper questions for ourselves, like what's really important in life? And that's the bit, I think, where we've begun, in a way, to restore the memory of communities. Because we've been living in a very consumeristic, individualistic type of world. And we've got to move away from that to a much sense of, it's all about us. You know, and John Sentamu, who's the Archbishop of York, when he was here, I think last year, he brought us a Ugandan proverb. He's Ugandan. He brought us a Ugandan proverb, and it's this: I am because you are. Now, I think that's pretty wonderful. And when I think about that, it sort of moves me and reminds me about how I am to live my life. And if we're doing that, living a life which says that I am because you are, then we're kind of reaching out to one another and trying to do the very best we can for one another. And that's what it's all about.
Dean Peter Beck, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure to be with you. God bless you.
That's City Life for today. If you'd like to get in touch with the program, you can email me, canetta@ctv.co.nz. You can call me 3777 033, or you can write to us, PO Box 1100 Christchurch. That's City Life, and thanks for watching. We'll be back with usual programming tomorrow.